Hi everyone, welcome to the session of our web series, Fireside Chat with Champions, in which we interview global business leaders, asking them crowdsourced questions relevant to the biggest challenge we face today, COVID-19, and its impact on various aspects of business as well as society, and the way we can steer ourselves in current uncertainties. Today we have with us Viola Llewellyn, President and co-founder of Ovamba Solution Incorporated. Ovamba is an award-winning African trade tech company that creates culturally attuned technologies for financial institutions so that they can serve formal and informal African SMEs in the trade and commodity sectors with short-term capital and financial inclusion. Ovamba's solution combine innovative Sharia compliant structures with e-commerce, logistics services, and technology to drive financial inclusion and promote growth. She is currently overseeing technology development, strategic implementation, investor communications, and global business development for Ovamba. Her past career includes building a $500 million life insurance investment fund for a Washington, D.C.-based insurance investment firm, where she led investor communications and asset management divisions. She has held positions with companies such as Unisys, IBM, KPMG, Bearing Point, and Rothschilds. Viola was listed in the Digital Undivided report as one of the only 34 Black women in the US to have raised more than $1 million for a technology company, as featured in the April issue of Vanity Fair magazine. She is listed on Innovative Finance's 216, 17, and 18 Women in FinTech Power List, and on Lattice 80's Top 100 Women in FinTech 2019. Ovamba, under her leadership, was also honored as a technology pioneer by World Economic Forum. Thanks, Viola, for accepting our invitation. I would request you to let our viewers know a bit more about you and your current interest and activities. Floor is all yours.
Deepak, thank you so much for reaching out to me. It's been fantastic being part of the World Economic Forum. I get to meet people like yourself, and I know that you're doing a brilliant job for all of us who are global tech pioneers, especially at the era in which we are in the world with COVID-19. It makes it imperative that we redefine who we are and why we do the things that we do. But you asked me the question to share with our friends out there who I am, what I do, and what's keeping me busy, basically. I'm excited about the fact that Ovamba has continued to find ways to pivot through a continuum of relevance as it relates to funding small and medium enterprises. And before COVID-19, we had begun to partner with banks because we understand that the business ecosystem does require digital solutions, but there's also that digital divide gap that prevents certain types of solutions and strategies from taking root easily, because there are still those on the manual side of the equation who need to be transitioned to the next. So we have done a lot of really great work in and around incorporating things like logistics and warehouse management, and then the technologies around those to help informal businesses with things like importation, product distribution. That was going very well. Now, having been with the World Economic Forum and been around people like yourself and many of the other great teams, we exchanged a lot of ideas and strategies, and my business partner Marvin Cole and myself got back to the drawing board and realized that fintech is great. Fintech is not new. After all, we all started out with creating things like ATM machines. But the thing that we noticed that was a bit of an imbalance on the African continent is that there were lots of solutions for payments, remittances, wallets, and money transfers. But there isn't very much focus on what are those payments paying for. And the continent, 1.1 billion human beings, more than 450 million small and medium enterprises, pushing almost 80% of GDP in amongst the informal sector, are the very ones who are not being served by banks. So, as a fintech or a trade tech solution, as we call ourselves, it became our mission to create products for the banks to do a better job of funding these small and medium enterprises. Now, we wouldn't be worth our salt as tech pioneers if we weren't constantly pushing the envelope out to find out where are the outer limits of this particular ecosystem that we choose to focus on. And that means that we run into people like the central banks, We start to think about how can we help them to do their job better? How can we use information and data, or a combination thereof, to give them clearer insights into what's going on into the far reaches of an economy? So from a work standpoint, COVID-19 has driven the need to get all of these paper and manual processes into a digital stratosphere, literally, for Africa. And that is work well worth doing. And what it means for me personally is that I have to ramp up my learning curve and change my leadership style, because I can't sit amongst my staff and, you know, get in the mix with them. I can't sit down with my business partner and knock on the door and say, have you got a minute? Neither can I stroll up to the MD of any of the banks that we've partnered with to have a conversation. And Deepak, I hope that as we go through this conversation, it will give us a chance to dive deeper into what are the stumbling blocks in that area, because these are the things we talk about. So here I am at home, no longer flying around on aeroplanes, racking up my frequent flyer miles and points. I am spending a lot of time with my husband, who I have discovered I really like after 22 years of marriage, and that we're sharing a workspace very, very peacefully. I did stumble and have a hard time at the beginning of this when lockdown was pronounced, because I'd become so used to standing on stages and talking to people, and I'd become so used to engaging on a personal basis with people. Now I really have to dig deep into making sure that narratives make sense, that we are conveying sentiment, intent as clearly as possible, and that we can get people to actually show up on Zoom calls on time. Can you imagine? These are the things that people are calling soft skills. They're not soft, they're really hard, they're difficult. So this is a time when we're all coming face to face with exactly who we are. Oh, and on top of that, I'm cooking a lot of bread and watching movies. What about you?
That's great introduction about the activities you are doing. Very lively. So I'm pretty sure that we'll have a very great discussion. So thanks, Shivula, for sharing your current activities. So today we would be talking about a continent which is very close to my heart. I consider myself an African, as was quoted by Kwame Nkrumah, the Ghana's first Prime Minister and President. I am not African because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me. This brings us to our first question. So that brings us to our first question. How do you see impact of COVID on SME and startup ecosystem in Africa?
It's going to have a variety of impacts, some of it good actually, and some of it not so good. The average, let's start from the bottom and work our way up to the top. At the very bottom, and I'm not really talking about subsistence level, because our focus is that middle grouping of small and medium enterprises that are not micro, but they're not large either. Distance has worked in the Western world, but distance is not feasible in some parts of our continent because of the way in which people do business. And although we are leading the world in cell phone use and the ways in which we use things like mobile money, there is that last piece of the digital process that still involves people needing to go and physically touch money or go into a bank. So the impact there is great in that solutions need to be created to keep people physically safe, keep them healthy, and to give them a reason to follow the path to a digital transformation. The other impact that is having is with schools closing, we will still need to address the education gap for those that are not able to attend school or who don't have communications, Wi-Fi, and internet access at home to have the same access to education as others. So again, we see a beginning of a division of that digital divide that I mentioned before. We also have the challenge of central banks and banks addressing the need for digital currency. Do they have a legal framework or a policy framework in mind? Are all banks willing to adopt this? I would be incredibly remiss if I did not bravely say that COVID-19 is going to have an impact on how fraud, crime, cybercrime, and corruption is taking place. Of course, in the confusion, there will be more of it, but there will also be those that will create new ways of either terroristic activity or new ways of money laundering or other types of financially based crime. So we will need to create new solutions for detection and solving that. And then, of course, bringing up the rear will always be the legal framework of how to deal with that. We will have some challenges and currently have challenges with working from home. Because we, in the Francophone section, still have a devotion to paper, things like digital signatures, PDF documents being admissible in the courts, all of that is going to have to be overhauled, but it means that things are grinding to a halt in some places while banks still try to figure out what's the right message to help our customers. How do we reassign and redress some of the financial instruments that we have in-house? And then take it all the way up to the fact that we were already looking at the falling off of oil dependency, which meant that some of the secondary markets were not working very well. There is an opportunity for us to look at things like the arts, solar, and other forms of alternative energy to get us to a more stable source of energy and electricity to help what's going to be an added drain on the system when everything begins to go digital. The medical profession, PPEs, where do you get those from? Usually China. The supply chains are broken. So the trade that we have become so used to is in a sense, it's in some disarray. But this means there's an opportunity. It's about time Africa started manufacturing its own goods from the very items that grow in and around us, which means that we can create secondary schools and vocational schools to teach us how to actually make things or how to become customer service centric using our ability to speak in so many different languages to supply support to other people's products and services for a change. So these are the things that I'm seeing that COVID-19 is bringing to the fore, a requirement to think things through or take a look at industries and find solutions that will work. Now, I want to also add, Deepak, you brought up in our preamble before how much you love Africa and how very familiar you are with our continent. I want the world to take note. We survived and continue to survive Ebola. We may not use the same methods of dealing with these disruptions or talking about it as, let's say, the Trumps of this world or other groups. But Africa does have its ways of dealing with social crises and health impact. And I think that we will find a way to deal with COVID. Ghana did a great job of shutting the borders down immediately and getting information out to everybody. Cameroon is not doing so well and the numbers are spiking where they shouldn't. But I think that because of the way the private sector operates there, many of them will just take over and take a civil approach for dealing with this pandemic, even if governments are not able to do so. Rwanda, Botswana, the same thing, taking a very forward-thinking approach to protecting the lives of citizens so that those citizens who drive business will be able to keep the economy quite stable.
No, in fact, like I'll say that keeping fingers crossed, so far Africa has not been so badly impacted as the rest of the world with 70,000 cases, which is less than the total deaths in America. So things are still far better. And most of this impact has been on the Northern Africa from typically Morocco, Egypt, and South Africa. So you'll find that a lot of countries, as you rightly mentioned, from Ghana to even Kenya, they have done pretty strict lockdowns, and that has helped a lot overall if you see things. Now that brings us to something which is a little bit closer to you and your activities, that is SME financing. So impact of COVID and subsequent lockdowns and imminent recession would be very profound on SME financing industry itself. And given the SME financing, it's already is pretty challenged when we talk about Africa, having funding deficit of close to $500 billion. Further, the limitations of compliances, as you were saying, which is still not as digital as they should have been. Then also the funds becomes a little bit riskier because of various frauds which you have been talking about. Would you be able to enlighten us that actually how do you see the challenges and opportunities in SME financing in Africa?
Well, you are quite right, Deepak. It was already challenged with the inability to deliver services to the underbanked and unbanked, because the solutions that should have been created by banks, that's not actually not their responsibility. This is why we have the rise of fintech and trade tech. But the impact is that the businesses that need access to capital still don't have the right risk models or credit models that are designed for their specific challenges. So where Ovamba had created non-interest bearing products because of the way we wanted to help banks with reducing non-performing loans, we probably won't even get that far with the current situation because the banks aren't lending. So what we need now more than ever is exactly what we started out with many years ago when we started the company in 2013, and that is trade finance is the next best thing for ensuring that access to the inventory required so that there can be a velocity of capital in the system to keep businesses in a trading mode. But that means it opens up the opportunity for digital currency. If everything is moved into a virtual platform, we do have the ability to ensure that there is business continuation. And business continuation also needs to have a hand-in-hand disaster response and disaster recovery. So small and medium enterprises will find themselves more fragile if they don't have the tools for shoring themselves up, both on the finance front, for managing cash flow, accessing market, accessing their customers, and distributing their goods, products, and services. We think it's important for banks to be able to sit down and take an honest look at what is challenging for them. Because although there are many who have online banking, we still haven't seen a real integration of mobile wallets or mobile money into people's bank accounts. As I mentioned before, just as with the challenge of dealing with last milers, there's always that last piece at the end where the reliance on paper has made it difficult for a complete commitment to a digital reality. There are some banks in Nigeria that are doing that, and there are 1 or 2 banks in Nigeria who've reached out to us to pilot our technology. The challenge to the small and medium enterprises is the education required to make them believe that they need to commit to these ideas, for them to believe that this is going to go ahead and you need to come on the journey. So it requires education, and it requires a very honest communication between the central banks and the banks to give them the tools, sandboxes being a good one, to help them figure out how to make their own internal adjustments. Banks are very loath to change. They are in the business of lending money. They're in the business of creating revenue from deposit accounts. They're in the business of finding only the very best customers to serve because they're risk averse. Teaching them how to loosen and adjust on the fly those risk models with every change that comes in society and every interruption to business as usual is what their technology needs to do. And that's where the role of AI becomes so very, very important. And that's, I think, how it's going to be for the time being. But I do believe that, as usual, these SMEs will continue to be as innovative as possible. They will rise to the challenge, and companies like Ovamba and many others will continue to seek ways to find the path of least resistance within the economic landscape.
That's pretty well articulated, and congratulations for, like, you know, getting few things which are very, very critical for Africa right through your company, ensuring that you are able to make bank, like, you know, understand that risk profiling can be improved. So that's a huge value addition to, like, you know, SMEs in Africa, who I think more than 85% of businesses in Africa are SMEs. A continent of more than 1 billion people, right, needing services like you. So congratulations for doing something which is very, very critical for this continent. Now that's bringing us a little bit closer to, like, you know, dissect the risk part which you talked about. Because post-COVID, you will see that it would be hitting Africa very badly for a very simple reason is that the demand of commodities which Africa produces a lot, typically minerals and oil and all that, is reducing substantially. At the same time, the things which Africa needs a lot, typically the food and the FMCG, you import a lot from other part of the world. Now, this creates a lot of disbalances, and if you put in a little bit of, I'll say that the recessionary forces, which is we live in a globalized world, you'll find that a lot of SMEs would be very risky to touch, specifically some sectors. According to you, which are those sectors in Africa which would be like, would be really challenged, and which are the sunshine sectors where like, you would like that the risk has reduced substantially? So I would like to understand from you, because you've been funding those SMEs, that what are those specific economic sectors where you'll bet, and which are the sectors you'll say, fine, I cannot serve everyone, so let's steer clear from them.
Again, Deepak, you have a great handle on what the basic realities are of risk, and knowing that there are asset classes and there are types of customers and there are types of businesses that may or may not do so well under the current circumstances, especially when banks are using traditional credit models to measure whether or not these are worthy to take some risk on. I will speak from the standpoint of Ovamba's portfolio, and over the last 6 years, we've conducted some of the deepest experimentation in asset mix, asset style, eventually landing on what I think is the go-to market product, the Murabaha, which we digitized. But in our alternative risk models and the kinds of customers that we have coming forward, we found that primary agriculture, highly risky. Highly risky because there aren't a lot of educational systems around basic farming, and you cannot always be sure that a seed that you put in the ground is going to yield a harvest. So we don't deal with primary agriculture, but agribusiness, which is a thriving industry. And I've seen groups like Greenhouse Ventures in Cameroon, run by a guy called Roland Fomendam, who has focused his attention on greenhouses and leasing land in a great business model. These are the kinds of risks that, for those looking at private equity, definitely go for that. For those of us who are looking for short-term funding for immediate growth, or to help these businesses with cash flow or getting operational capital out of their existing businesses, agribusiness is exciting for us. So funding the importation of a tractor, engine oil, tires, those who are involved in fast-moving consumable goods, always a great risk, because the growing middle class, which will continue to grow even with COVID, are exciting. Now, because of COVID, pharmaceuticals, PPEs, cleaning products, all of those digital, onto the other side of the digital divide. That's because we still have customers who, from a risk standpoint, may seem a little challenging because they haven't had a lot of growth. They're still using family members as employees, whereas they could be positioned to be the source of great employment in their region. So we take the risk on taking that business and their business aspirations and giving them access to more inventory to sell, and then managing that risk by assuring that the rotation of their goods and that their suppliers and all of this in a total package makes sense and will have the desired ROI and impact on the environment. Another sector that we have a difficult time with measuring risk for, and I don't like them in our portfolio because of the way that they perform, are those interesting individuals who may have a business that also has government contracts, or they're working with governments. So taking a look at how to understand the presence of politically exposed individuals, let's be very honest about how this works, that has a direct impact on portfolios, has a direct impact on how investors want to take risk with companies like ourselves. So because we don't have those centralized databases to get a full track record of the history of an individual, where they've been and who they've been speaking to, which is very much like contact tracing for COVID-19, businesses that can manage understanding who people are related to, people like ourselves, that's a really interesting thing to not only invest in, but to pay attention to, because of the impact that it has on the types of risk we want to take and the types of SMEs. I mentioned before, women, regardless of the sector that they're in, tend to boost portfolio performance. We've talked about agriculture, we've talked about pharmaceutical. Now let's talk about education. This is an area that we did not previously take a look at, but now that we partner with banks, we do get individuals who are probably going to be looking for support to transition from brick and mortar schools to something that can monetize a digital learning platform. So we're looking forward to seeing how that works. The same with telemedicine and hospital services. Now in the Western world, that's a no-brainer. in our part of the world, there are many parameters that need to be taken into consideration, especially if it is a government-run hospital or if it's a private hospital. They both have different metrics, different business models, and they operate very differently. So taking risks and looking at SMEs that provide services to these industries is something that we take a look at, and I'm sure if you dig deeper into that, you start to see the patterns, especially if you're using AI to measure those. But for us, we're going to continue with the fast-moving consumer goods. We have always shied away from anything to do with timber, logging, and extractive industries. Alcohol is a big business for some. It's not something that we deal with because of the way in which we use Sharia finance as an element to drive an ethical type of business solution for the majority of the businesses that would not ordinarily get access to bank services. So I'm trying to make sure that I haven't left anything out. There is one thing I have left out. They're not really SMEs, but if you look back historically in the world, whenever there's been a social disruption, the role of movies has come to the surface as people seek to find a way to feel better. I have recently been paying a lot of attention to the production of movies within the Central African region. And these young individuals who could not get themselves into jobs or develop businesses that banks would finance are turning to the arts as a way of generating not just revenue, but a way of expressing themselves. This is important from an SME standpoint because the movie industry had actually disappeared for a while. There were no movie houses in Cameroon. But now we have individuals wanting to learn the different areas of the film and production industry and the music industry. And they're creating businesses that create services. So this is a whole new blue ocean, as far as I'm concerned, that can be understood and can be financed because they're going to need to buy things. So these are the parallel industries that we pay attention to and that we want to be able to help support and make successful.
No, excellent, excellent, very well articulated. I would just like to add a small thing here because I work in agriculture domain. So I strongly feel that Africa is very ripe for SME funding for agri-input retailers. So there is a huge market, a huge opportunity, because if you see that the farmers in Africa are consuming 1/10 of what the world is consuming when we talk about inputs, and hence their productivity is low. So you'll find in next few years, to ensure the food security, and I keep on interacting with African Union and a lot of state heads of increasing the productivity of rice in Madagascar or coffee in Ethiopia. We found that there is a broken supply chain because of financing of retailers. And I strongly believe that's a very, very strong business because the time duration is very less there because you fund only for a season. So typically the farmers buys input, use it, and when he harvests, he returns back. So you're talking about 4 to 6 months max. And that's the short-term financing gap, which is leading to reduction in the productivity of Africa. And I believe you can have a look at that. Now that's bring us to like something. Yeah, please, you were saying something?
You're spot on yet again. After all, the transactions that we fund are 4 to 6 months and have a seasonality because the agribusiness does affect nearly every area of our lives on that part of the continent. You're right, supply chains are broken. So what we found that is very important, we have worked in those regions, but our model doesn't quite work for that. But the agri inputs and everything else that happens in and around that is one of the reasons why banks have a hard time financing these businesses, because when the season is over, they go and do something else. And unfortunately, their credit models are looking for sustained continuation of one activity as a level of consistency. And that's not a reality for where we are. So we're able to take those inputs and say, this individual at the moment has finished with, let's say, the cocoa season, and now they have moved into a retail business, whereas previously they were involved in some sort of upper retail or wholesale business. But you take a look at where they are, what they're doing, where they're from, even ethnicity, and what the activity of that family has been over a few generations, and you begin to see that there is indeed a pattern. It's similar to how unfortunately inappropriate it is when we speak to investors that don't understand the African market and they want to know Which Big Four accounting firm do your customers use? What on earth are you talking about? We're talking about individuals who keep their books in their head or have multiple books or come with bundles of receipts that Ovamba has created the right technology to scan and understand what is your basic balance sheet appearance. It may not be deliberately accurate, but that's why we look at risk from many different areas and not just what the financial health of this business is, because they may be earning all of their income in one 6-month period of time, and then everything else is cash flow imbalance the rest of the time. That does not mean that the business is not healthy, and it does not mean that the operator doesn't know what they're doing.
No, that's awesome. Good to know about the activities you are doing around that. So now let me come a little bit closer to you as an individual. So Viola, I would like to understand that, like, COVID has been something which is being challenging for all of us. And as you have mentioned that you are spending more time with your family, so that's a big plus. But not all people are as mentally strong as you. So what change in the mindset or the pattern of your activity you would like to share with the audience so that actually they can learn something to come out of this COVID epidemic as a stronger person as well as a stronger organization?
Sometimes the easiest things are the hardest things. And it was very difficult for me to not have business as usual by which to define myself. I cried a lot, Deepak. I sat on the couch, I drank a lot of red wine, and I watched a lot of cartoons. But I also realized that sometimes the more you fight something instead of letting things happen, the harder it is to get going. So I allowed myself to be inactive for about 2, almost 3 weeks. And then as I literally came off that whole mental merry-go-round and saw all of my meetings falling off and all of my speaking engagements falling off, it was as if I waited till everything hit rock bottom and then just restarted again. What makes it easier is reminding oneself of why you're doing something. Just because the route to the goal has changed doesn't mean the goal has changed. But it does mean that your leadership style and your sense of self will change. After all, we grow all the time. The person I was yesterday, last week, or before COVID-19 is not who I am today. If you continue to be alive, then you continue to expect to change and to be challenged. If you are fortunate enough to be faced with challenge, it means that you have the opportunity for growth and you have the opportunity to create more opportunity. You have the chance to make yourself relevant and create new business models that might just be exactly what you wanted. It was difficult with COVID-19 to have a sense of relevance with my business partners. I mentioned to you earlier when we were speaking, Prashant Mahajan, our Chief Technology Officer, is in India, and Marvin is in Douala. My staff are in Ivory Coast, New Jersey, New York. Our fund structure is in Mauritius, and majority of our staff are in Cameroon. Excuse me. And we were right at the brink of new investors. All of that stopped. It was a time to reignite relationships. It was a time to redefine who we are as managers. It was a time to have some honest conversations with our staff. They were looking to us for leadership, wondering, what are we going to do now? Well, we went back to our strategic and creative roots and asked, what problems can we fix to make life better for other people? And we did that, looking at ways in which to create delivery products, seeing as we already do that with our logistical support to our SMEs. How do we live at home with our spouses who are now seeing a totally different version? I'm never home, Deepak. You and I were saying earlier, I'm often on a plane. I'm sometimes gone from home for 2 or 3 months. I come home and my husband's been running the show by himself. I don't get to see the grandchildren. I don't see my daughters. Well, I spend more time with those individuals now. I've learned how to make bread. I have learned that I have a very different delta of creative output compared to when I'm on the road. So I take advantage of that. There are times when I am on such a high from speaking to people, making arrangements, being on webinars with great people like yours. And then there are times when I've had to learn to find that peaceful stillness to sit down and create, write, respond to people, and use more effort to communicate a narrative that people want to buy into. We can all do that. We can take time to read. you're now being forced, when you sit from across from somebody on a digital divide, to have them believe and see the visions that you have. And you cannot do that if you don't have an authentic relationship with yourself where you know your limits. And you also cannot do that by yourself, so you need to work with your teams. Teamwork has become the greatest thing and the hardest thing to produce. Transitioning your culture from an everyday business work environment into a digital one, making sure that your staff know that show up for the call-in on time, best if you're not wearing your pajamas if you're going to be online and visible. And so many different etiquettes that you now have to learn for when you're dealing with people on webinars and on broadcasts. We've found new partnerships with people. We've found more reason to change the way in which we think about winning. It's no longer the binary rule of I win, you lose. It's instead, let's all win together. That way, when the business and the ecosystem is sustainable, we can bring back healthier forms of competition. The world will never again appreciate or admire or want to pursue that sense of winning where one wins, everybody loses. That is not a healthy place for us to be. And COVID-19 has given me more validation to commit to such an idea and to build a business that has a cultural root in everybody wins.
That's pretty well articulated again. And I love the way you talked about different aspects, and you have been very honest about talking about how you've gone from low to highs, and now you are having complete control of what you are doing and where you are. So peace of mind is most important, and God has blessed you with that peace of mind. So let's thank God for that. So that brings us to the last part of this discussion. I need 4, 5, 6 silver bullet actionable point for the startup and entrepreneurs, what they should do in these challenging times so that when the COVID is over, they still have a lot of oxygen to survive.
Very good question. Rebuild your vision board, because it's not the same as it was before. Discuss your expectations with other individuals, especially people who you don't normally speak to. Everybody's got an opinion, and you're going to need either validation or stimulation, incentive or inspiration. And you can find that in the strangest of places. Pick up the phone and speak to somebody. Don't text them. Next thing is take a look at your business plan, your business model, and make sure that it is built for where the world is going in the long run. You may have to, if you've had 2, 3, 5 years under your belt as a company, you may have to go right back to the drawing board and become a startup all over again. You also should reach out to your investors and have very serious, honest conversations about what you're struggling with and what you need from them. Take a look at your finances and make sure that you're taking advantage of every single stimulus plan that may be out there that you could be open to. Take a look at how your work environment, whether it is conducive to you doing your very best work. Try to get lots of sleep. Don't drink too much alcohol if you can. But in terms of concrete steps that you can definitely take care of your health. Take care of your mental health. Seek help for it if you're not feeling right. I know I wasn't feeling right in the beginning. I called friends and family and had many tearful moments of being afraid that everything I've worked for might just go. But it didn't. It meant I had to transition. So we'll go through them again. Take a look at your vision board, refix it. Take your business plan. Is it relevant? Is it going to take you the long distance? Speak to your investors. Seek other forms of financial support or get a stay on your invoices or anything or your repayables if you need to. Reach out and speak to your customers and your alliances and ensure that they're okay as well and that you haven't kept them at bay because you're going through too much. And make sure that you stay peaceful and happy and know that we will come out the other end. Try to do something good for somebody every single day if you can.
Awesome advice, and it has been a good learning for me in this discussion, and I'm very sure that audience would also learn a lot out of this discussion. Thanks a lot, Viola. It was a pleasure talking to you. Look forward to see you face to face sometime soon. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you for everything you do for all of us.
Take care. Bye.
Take care.